Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today at this Your Overseas Home webinar, which today will focus on our top tips for when you're going on a property viewing trip to France. My name's Hannah Armstrong and I'm one of the team here at Your Overseas Home. You may know us as Your Overseas Home, and you may also have come across our sister business, Property Guides. As a business, our main aim is to help you realise your dream of buying property overseas. So whether that's by reading some of the guides that we produce, attending our events such as this, or connecting you with industry experts, we want to make this process as safe and enjoyable as possible for you. So to give you the very best tips and advice before you head out to France today, I'm joined by 3 industry experts who'll be sharing all of their knowledge and insights with us. First up, you'll hear from Paul Harris of Smart Currency Exchange. Next up, Pauline Johnson of Beauvillage, and we're just waiting for Matthew Cameron of Ashton's Legal to join us in a little bit. For those of you who are listening in live today, if you've got any questions that you'd like to put to our panelists, please do type those into the questions tab on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll try and get as many of those answered for you. We've also got a question that we would like to put to you, the audience, today. So if you could head to the polls section, which is again near that questions tab on the right-hand side, and answer that question about your viewing trip, that will really help us tailor today's session for you. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Paul Harris, to talk to us about the budgeting and currency planning part of the buying journey. Paul and his team are based here in the UK, and he regularly presents at events like this. He's been working with foreign exchange clients for over 10 years now, so he's really well placed to share his expertise and advice. So welcome, Paul. I'd like to start, if you could just start by asking you just to give us a little bit of background into Smart Currency Exchange and how you can help today's listeners.
Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, morning, everyone. So yeah, just a brief background of Smart. So we are a foreign currency specialist, and we've been around in the market for over 15 years now. So over that time, we've helped over 40,000 people in exactly the same position as yourselves to help buy a property overseas, obviously property in France in this case as well. We look to manage the risk that's associated with currency for you and really keep the costs as low as possible from a currency transaction standpoint. And we offer a completely tailored service to all our clients individually, as everyone's requirements are completely different. So yeah, I'll talk more about all the little extras and things that we can offer through this webinar.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Paul. So obviously in the context of viewing trips, we've got a lot of people who are planning to head out on trips, over the next sort of 6 months. How early do customers need to start thinking about the currency part of their process? Where in the buying journey does that come in?
It comes in right at the very start, even if the actual currency transaction isn't something you're thinking about. You may be looking at property online, you may be speaking to an agent. When you're looking online or you're speaking to an agent, you'll be talking about the types of property, so how many bedrooms, where's it located, what amenities does it have, but there'll also be a price, so you'll have a price range that you'll be looking for. So as you'll be buying in France, those prices will obviously often be in euros, so that's where we can help you out. So if you're based in the UK looking at a property in euros and your current money is in sterling, right at the early stages we can help you out and we can really understand what your UK budget, so if you've got your money in UK pounds or even other currencies, we can help you understand how far that can go into euros and really make sure that we're managing not just the currency risk, but making sure that the properties you're looking at are affordable.
Brilliant. That's great advice. Thank you, Paul. And you mentioned in your little intro there about sort of different services and different products that Smart can offer. Can you just talk us through then the different ways that we could transfer money with you?
Absolutely. So there's 4 main sort of popular products that we offer. If you've done any research so far, you may have seen either spot contracts or forward contracts. Now, a spot contract is essentially you would talk to us, say today, agree a price with us today. We'll tell you what the exchange rate is, how much X amount of pounds is going to cost, is going to achieve in euros. And we agree that price today, and that price is fixed for today. You send over your sterling to us within the next couple of days. We send the euros straight out to where you want them to go. It's a popular product, and it's a really quick and easy way of getting money over to France. But one thing that's for property buyers, a product that's more popular. Sorry, I'll get my words out eventually. Is a forward contract. So a forward contract is a fantastic offering for a property buyer, and the reason for that is it really helps you with the budgeting, because if, for example, you were on a viewing trip today, you find the property, you fall in love, and you sign on the dotted line. Now, typically the time between signing and actually completing could be up to 3 months, sometimes potentially less or more or less. But from our experience, it's average around 3 months. So the forward contract gives you complete peace of mind. So at any point between when you sign on the dotted line to when you actually complete, the exchange rate will be going up and down. So the price, the amount that it's actually costing you in sterling, will be changing all the time. So you'll have agreed a price in euros. That price is fixed. The price doesn't change. But while you're waiting for the completion date, the exchange rate will immediately be costing more or less in pounds. So that's where a forward contract can be a really brilliant tool and really helpful to control your budget. So what a forward contract actually is. So if you say for example, you agree on a property today, sign on the dotted line, and the exchange rate is exactly where you want it to be. So we can actually, again, agree the price today. You don't have to pay for the full contract until the completion date. So we can hold a forward contract for up to 12 months. So again, it gives you a long window to have that security. But what it does is you agree today's price, and that price stays the same. So you know that your budget is completely secure. You know how much your property is costing you in euros, which you've already agreed on. And now you know how much your property is costing you in sterling or whatever currency you're currently holding. So it really gives you peace of mind. You can stop worrying about how much things are going to cost you, because the markets may fall or will undoubtedly move around. So it gives you full security, and then you can obviously focus on other things. And our job really is to try and pinpoint the best time for you. So if the market is good at the time, and you're happy with it, potentially it's actually slightly better than where you'd originally budgeted, which obviously is great. And then again, if the market was to drop and you've agreed in a forward contract, that price is held and completely secure for you. So it gives you full peace of mind. A couple of other options available to us are orders. So if, for example, again, same example, you sign on the dotted line, the market isn't exactly where you want it to be. So you want the market, so you want the pound to be a little bit stronger, and the rates to be a little bit higher. Absolutely fine. We can look at putting orders into the market for you. So we have two options. It's either an order to call or an order to buy. So an order to call is exactly what it says on the tin. So you say, for example, at the moment we're around the 117 mark on the market, but you want the rates to be up at 120, and that's where you want to be trading. We can certainly target that rate for you, and then when that rate is hit, we'll give you a call, explain that the rate is achievable now for you. And then we'll obviously look to transact if you're happy to do so. The other option is an order to buy. So that is exactly the same. As soon as that rate is hit, we would actually buy the currency for you at that point. So you send the money to us ahead of time. As soon as that rate is hit, the contract is triggered, and we get the currency out at that pre-agreed rate. The most important thing to mention, if you're looking at an order, is we cannot guarantee that. So just because we've got an order in for a rate that isn't there at the moment, doesn't mean we're going to get there. We can't control the markets ourselves. We'll be working 100% from the live market. So if the live market isn't where you're aiming at, we can't obviously achieve that rate for you. So it does come with a little bit of added risk. And unlike the forward contract, if between the day where we fix an order and the day where you need to complete, if the rates do drop, they aren't protected at the rate you had on the original day, like a forward contract does. So it does come with a little bit of added risk. Obviously, you can benefit from the upside. So four very popular things. The most popular is the forward contract, because it offers peace of mind, but we do take orders all the time, and we'll work very closely with those clients who have the orders in, giving updates throughout.
Thanks, Paul. That's a fantastic overview of how customers can work with Smart. Can I ask, what are your fees or commissions for these services that you just mentioned?
So we don't charge a fee at all, and we don't charge a commission. So it's completely free. Service is completely free for you. Now we obviously make money. It's where we buy and sell the currency is where we make our money. So the rates that you see online. So if you Google, let's just say pound sterling to euro, you'll see an exchange rate. We can buy very close to that rate from the banks, and the rate we offer for yourself will always be slightly below. So we make our money between where we're buying the currency and where we're selling the currency. But we'll always be completely transparent with where those two exchange rates are. and there won't be any fees on top, or we won't come to you later down the line saying, okay, we've moved this money, we now need this fee. So it's a completely free service and completely transparent with the exchange rates that you're going to get and how much things are going to cost you.
That's brilliant. That's really good to know. Thank you. You touched on it a little bit there when you were explaining about the different products, but what happens if somebody books a forward contract, say in advance of a viewing trip, so they're really sure on what their budget is going to be, but then they don't find a property that they want, or their purchase, in the unlikely event falls through? What happens if they're already committed to a contract at that point?
So that does happen. We work very closely with you if you do need to cancel contracts. If you've got a forward contract booked in, and you just need to extend it, so you haven't found the property on that viewing trip, but you're still planning to do it in the future, we can roll that contract and we can move it on to a further date for you. Occasionally there may be a slightly additional cost on top of that, but that will be something that you can discuss with the trader for sure, or with your account manager that will be managing your account with us. And if you need to completely cancel, then again, yes, that's absolutely fine. The way a forward contract works is when you book the forward contract, we take up to a 10% deposit. So that 10% deposit is just holds the exchange rate for you, and then on completion you pay the remaining 90%. Now, if you need to cancel the contract, we will discuss if there's any losses on the contract. There often won't be, but there sometimes will be, and that may come out of the deposit. But again, the account manager and trader that's working with you will always try and avoid that at all costs. So again, we'll work, if there are going to be any potential losses, we'll work with you on that to see if there's any way that we can avoid those costs for you. But yeah, if you are fixed into a contract, you do have the ability to cancel them.
That's reassuring to know. Thank you. Now, I know this is always a tricky question to answer, but clients do often ask, do Smart do any kind of forecasting or any kind of predictions as to what might happen to the rates? And, can you share any advice on that, perhaps over the next 6 months?
So we do write a forecast. So we do have our own company forecast where we'll do a quarterly update with what's coming up and what things could potentially affect the market. One thing that we try and steer clear of is predicting exchange rates. Anyone that is predicting an exchange rate is just predicting an exchange rate based on what could potentially be happening. There's nobody in the world that can tell you from one day to the next what the exchange rate is going to be the next day, because it is completely market dependent, and there's so many different factors that can impact the exchange rate. Within our forecast, we do have some information on just the different variances between certain banks that do offer predictions on exchange rates. Because if you go online and look on the HSBC website or whichever bank, they will actually predict an exchange rate. But again, it's just it could be down to one analyst that's just giving their input, and it could be what their opinion is on, say, Brexit or how we're going to be after COVID. So depending on if they're positive or negative about those things, they may say the rates are going to be stronger or maybe weaker. I'd always say take someone that's forecasting an actual exchange rate with a bit of pinch of salt. We steer clear of that. We know that there's certain things that will be coming up that could impact it. Absolutely, we're about to hopefully come out of all the lockdowns. So there will be slight positive news going around, but over the last week, we've seen big peaks and troughs in the sterling euro rate for sure. So very hard to predict an exact exchange rate. To say there's some positive signs coming around, but you really never know. This last week, if you look at the markets, the last week they've been very, very volatile for the last week. So we simply don't know what the rate will be, but hopefully there's something positive on the horizon.
Brilliant. That's really helpful. Thanks, Paul. And I know that's always a tricky question to answer. Now, we've had a question in from a listener this morning. Steve has asked, are you able to set up a foreign bank account that I could transfer money into on a regular basis from the UK? Are you able to help with that?
So we don't help with the actual setting up of the banks themselves. That's you would need to go to either the banks directly, or you may be able to get some support potentially from a contact over in France. So maybe a solicitor might be able to help you out with that sort of thing, but that's not something that we would be able to help out with.
But in terms of regular transfers, so people could still do a monthly transfer via Smart as long as they had perhaps used, Matthew was nodding there, perhaps used a solicitor to help them set up the bank account. They can trade monthly with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So just to touch on the monthly aspect. So if it is a regular amount that you'll be looking to transfer monthly, a very popular product of ours is a regular payment plan. Obviously earlier I spoke about the types of contract that could be related to potentially the actual property purchase itself. But even before you buy the property, or even after you buy the property, if you've got ongoing bills, either if you've moved to France, you need to send money back regularly, we can set that up again on a standing order basis, where again we can either fix the exchange rate for up to 12 months or just do it on a standing order basis each month. So yes, we can do that monthly. It's no problem at all.
Perfect. That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Paul. I'm conscious of our time today, and there's lots of questions to get through. So I'm going to move on to our next speaker now. But thank you very much, Paul. And if there are some more questions that do come in, we might be able to get those answered at the end. So obviously, the main reason for your viewing trip is obviously going to be to go and see the beautiful homes that France has to offer. So to share insight and expertise on the French market, I'd like to welcome today Pauline Johnson from Beau Village. Now, Pauline is a sales consultant with Beau Village, and she's been with the business for over 3 years now. Pauline made the move to France herself in 2003, so really knows firsthand what it's like to actually move over from the UK over to France. So welcome today, Pauline. I'd love it if you would start by just giving us a little bit of background into Beau Village and how you would be able to help our listeners today.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I moved over 2003. I've been with Beau Village now since beginning of 2018, so 3.5 years. They started French registered company. They started in the Dordogne and have grown. So we now cover all of the southwest of France and continuing to grow. Lots of agents, lots of British, lots of French agents, lots of Belgian, Dutch. So there's lots of nationalities. So there's lots of people that can help in terms of the demand from all over. The way it works is usually people are fairly specific about the region that they want to work in, and so you would get allocated to an agent like myself who would try and help you and lead you through the process of purchasing a property.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Pauline. So thinking about it from a viewing trip perspective then, if a customer, we've got a lot of listeners today, the majority of people listening actually today said that they were hoping to go on a trip in the next 3 months. So if they were starting to think about planning their trip, how many properties would you recommend that they try to view in a trip, and sort of how long would you recommend they come out for?
How long's a piece of string? That's a tricky one.
True.
In terms of, if you imagine that you're coming for 2 weeks, it's difficult to say genuinely, because it could be that you found the property of your dreams, the first one that you saw, or it could be that it takes quite a few viewings to find the ones that you want, the one that you want. My suggestion is really to start looking carefully before your trip and get everything planned. So lots of things. Paul's already touched on some of them. The type of property, the location that you want, the style of property, number of bedrooms, garden. Think about what you would compromise on and what you wouldn't. Make sure you've got everything, all your ducks in a row in terms of finances, because the market's quite fast at the moment. So it would definitely be advantageous to make sure that all your finances are ready. Because what you don't want is to find that property of your dreams and then lose it because you can't act fast enough because you've not sold a property or you've not got the finances sorted. My other concern, I work down in the Languedoc region, and it's a big area down here. So we have people that come and say, I want to see this, this and this property, which is fine, except perhaps they don't take into consideration the distances between them. So one other aspect might be that you would want to come down, have a drive around the areas for a couple of days to really pinpoint where you want it to be, rather than be driven by the house, to have a look at the area and see what that's going to offer you. If it's a long-term home, has it got everything that you would want moving forward? If it's a holiday home, is it close to all the things that you want to be able to get to? So it is really very, very variable. And you need to be able to talk to the agent so that they understand what it is that you're after. They need to be clear about what you're looking for, what price range that you're looking for, and talk to them, because they'll be able to understand everything better for you and plan an agenda. In terms of the actual viewings, I would allow, as an agent, I allow between 30-45 minutes per viewing. But again, take into consideration the distances between the two. I've been there twice myself in terms of viewing over here and looking for properties when I've moved. And it can be, you can underestimate really how tiring it is, how draining it is, and the distances you have to cover. So don't try and cram too much in. Take time to take stock of what you're looking at and whether it would really suit you. Again, talk to the agent. They know better in terms of how the distances between properties and what you would need. And think about your time frames. Think about schools if you need those, if you need work, whatever it might be. Read the small print. Read the small print on all the on the adverts about the property. And if there's something you're not sure on, ask the agent. They know for sure.
That's fantastic advice. Thank you, Pauline. And in terms of working with an agent, working with you and your team at Beauvillage, how early on in their process do customers need to start getting in contact with you to actually plan out a viewing trip? How much notice do you need if a customer wants to come out and see you in France?
They can contact us at any point, genuinely at any point. And we would probably say, or I would probably advise people, I have people on my books that have been looking for quite a long time, and either they've not had the opportunity to come over for various reasons, perhaps financial, perhaps COVID related, or they've just not found the one that's really grabbed them. So what I would say to those people is keep looking at the sites, and then perhaps 2 or 3 weeks before they were planning to come, to really then get back in contact with the agent to start narrowing down what properties are available, what would suit them, can they get to see them, all of those aspects really. There is also, to add into that we do virtual viewings. So if somebody can't come, we do virtual viewings for a lot of properties. And in fact, I think it's about 15% of clients at the moment are actually buying just via a virtual viewing. So there is that aspect of it. But yes, make sure that you're clear on what you're wanting to view. And I say, in terms of the way Beauvillage work, one of our benefits is that we also have a BVI Plus scheme where we can send you, in exchange for proof of ID, photo ID, we will send you a location for where the property is, so you can see for yourself on Google Maps, Google Earth, what's around it. And so it's really useful, and it does save unwanted trips in many occasions.
Brilliant. That's fantastic advice. Thank you so much for that, Pauline. You touched on it at the beginning when you were talking about sort of getting your ducks in a row in terms of purchasing. Can you just talk to us a little bit about, do customers need to have sort of proof of funds before they're able to make offers on properties?
Yeah, I think the whole financial thing is really key. My advice is, unless you are ready to move from a financial point of view, then you potentially are wasting yours and the vendors and our time. And I don't mean that to be obstructive. I just mean to get the best out of it for yourselves. We need to be spending our time with people who are ready and keen to buy, who have got the finances in place. So don't be surprised if an agent might ask for proof of funds, or ask you certainly how you are going to fund it. If you put an offer in, and you could put an offer in at any stage, but if you put an offer in, then we are obliged to ask for proof of funds, so that we know you are proceedable and serious. And proof of funds could be in any shape or form. It could be a letter from an accountant or the bank. It could be a screenshot of a bank account. It could be lots of different things. It could be proof you've sold your property. It could be lots of different things. But certainly for us, we have the confidence and the assurity then that you are proceedable, and we will do everything in our power to get that property that you're after to move forward.
Great, that's really useful to know. Thank you, Pauline. Now we've had a question in a little bit about funds and about mortgages. I'm just going to read it out precisely just to make sure I get this right. So this is a question in from Mark, and he would like some clarity on the requirement to prove that a property is more likely to secure a French mortgage if it's in a touristy area. Can you give any advice on proving that it's likely to be possible to let out a property in order to be able to more likely to secure a mortgage? Have you got any advice on that?
My advice is always speak to a legal person. So for me, like, we work quite, and I say about we, you know, all the agents, we're all professionals and have been doing it for quite a while. So we tend to have good relationships with local notaires, accountants, whoever it might be. So my first advice there would be to talk to the agent to see if they can get advice from one of the notaires or something. You can get French mortgages without a doubt, and again, talk to the agent, because we can help you with that. We can put you in touch with specific banks, agencies, whatever it might be, that can give you advice. Sometimes if you're, and I know that if sometimes you're getting a property that is, say, chambre d'hôte or letting, it's slightly more difficult to get a mortgage, but don't let it put you off. Speak to somebody to find out whether that's possible or not.
Brilliant, that's great. Thank you, Pauline. And Matthew, you were nodding along there, so we'll certainly come to you and ask those questions as well in a moment. Now we've had a question in from Joe, who said, "What is it normal to offer below the asking price? Is it normal to be able to sort of, you know, get discounts on properties in France? How does that work compared to a UK market?"
In France, I would always say don't compare anything to a UK market, regardless, almost, really. Again, I know I'm repeating myself constantly, but talk to the agent, whoever it is, whichever agent. The agent knows the property best, knows the vendors, knows the situation. They will discuss with you what your proceedability is. You know, it's not a question of the property's on at 100,000, you go in at 10 or 20% below. It doesn't work like that. The agent will know the history. So, for example, I was doing a viewing yesterday. It was a property that was 430,000, something like that. And I had the very same question from a buyer, potential buyer, in terms of how much should I go in lower. But the background that I gave them was that this vendor had literally just reduced it from 500. So there's no way that this guy's going to accept a big decrease in price. So again, take advice, listen to advice that's given to you, and get a better understanding of it. Most properties sell slightly under, but at the moment the market's moving fast, and now we're in a situation we've not seen for a long time, where properties, some people are fighting over properties and are giving full asking price and beyond. So it's a very different market now.
That leads really nicely, Pauline, into my next question, which was going to be, can you give us a bit of an overview on that market post-COVID? I think a lot of people were sort of expecting now might be a time to get a good deal or, you know, get discounts on properties, but I sense that's not the case. Can you give us any indication what's happening in your area at the moment?
It's gone mad. It's gone mad. Yes, it's very active, is what I would say, and I think that's the same for the whole of Beauvillage throughout the regions. Down here in the Languedoc, very, very active, and all nationalities are buying. You know, it's not just British people or French. Lots of other nationalities are in the mix, so it's quite competitive. So my advice again to people is that if you see something that you genuinely like, even if it's your very first property, just because it's your first property doesn't mean that you have to see others. So whatever the situation, think very carefully, because if you wait too long, potentially you could lose it. The market is the most active it's been for a long time. The stock levels are less now. You know, there's properties coming on the market all the time, but they're moving faster.
Thank you. And with this fast-moving market, can customers ask for a second visit to a property, or do they really need to sort of move quickly at the moment?
Absolutely, a second visit. Absolutely can do. So you could ask for a second visit on any property, really. whether you'd put in an offer or not, or if you were thinking of putting in an offer, yes, you could do a second visit or a virtual viewing, whatever it might be. So yes, by all means, you could do a second viewing. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Now, a few questions from the audience have come in. Julia has asked about committing to working with agents. So she said that she'd asked for postcode references of some of the properties because she wanted to have a look on Google Maps and get a sense of the area. But then she'd been told at that point she would have to commit to using that agent. Is that the case? Are there any levels at which you've got to commit to buying with a certain agent?
No, absolutely not. I can only speak from a Beau Village point of view, but the way we work, we're quite open, and the way it is with us is that you can ask information on properties. We will gladly give you that. If you want a specific location for a property, we do ask that you join the BVI Plus scheme. There's information on our site that people can look at for that. And as I say, all it tends to do really is ask for photo ID, and proof of address, and that's it. That gets held in a secret location. It's not shared with third parties, anything like that. And then we will happily send you a location for where the property is, and it gets logged on a bond of visit. And also the vendors get notified that somebody has been given their location. So I don't know for other agencies. I know it's something we do because we're trying to work with our buyers. And they find that really helpful. So yeah, it's certainly an option with us.
Great, thank you, Pauline. I hope that's answered that question for you, Julia. Andrew's asked a question about planning permission. He's found a property he's found a property that he likes, but it needs some renovation work doing, but his agent wasn't sure if it had planning permission or not. Is there anything that you can help with in terms of how to determine if there's planning permission? Or Matthew is his interest was piqued there. Matthew also may be able to answer this question. You can defer if you want, Pauline.
No, I'll quite happily take it because as an agent, we get involved in all of this. So normally when we would take a property on to come onto our site, we would have checked beforehand what works have been done, has a pool been put in, all of these things, and we would ideally scan in and see all the documentation so that we know for a property that it's sound, it's all been regularized, everything's okay. However, there are occasions where things have changed or something's not happened or something's not been completed. It depends on what was done and what was required. Some things need full planning permission, others just need a form that gets passed to the mairie to be stamped. So it is all a bit of a nightmare, but usually your agent working alongside the local mairie or the notaire can resolve most issues. But again, if you are unsure whether a property has planning on something, then the agent should be able, if they've not got that information, should be able to go back to the vendor to clarify the situation. And even if something had been put in, a swimming pool or a wall or something, usually, not always, but usually you can get retrospective for it. It takes anything up to 2 months. But yes, normally that can be done retrospectively, which I've done in quite a few cases. So most things are surmountable.
Wonderful, thank you. And one last question for you, Pauline, before we must move on. I'm conscious of our time. People then, if they've been out, they've met with you and your team, they've found a beautiful property, they've made an offer. Can they continue that process from back home in the UK, or do they need to stay in France to kind of complete their buying journey?
Anywhere in the world, anywhere in the world. You don't even, you could have viewed here, you could have viewed on a virtual viewing and put in an offer, you could have viewed here 1 visit, 2 visits, whatever, put in an offer and then move back to the UK. We have, again, we work closely with the notaires, so if your French wasn't very good, we can select English speaking notaires where they can talk you through some of the stuff. We can do it ourselves. So no, everything can be done from the UK. They can get power of attorney, and documents can be signed over here. It doesn't mean that you're missing out on anything or everything, because you would see exactly the same documentation as if you were here, and it would be explained to you. So no, absolutely, 100%, you could be anywhere.
Perfect, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Pauline. If we've got time at the end, there are maybe a couple more questions that we can get through, but I do want to bring in Matthew at this point and introduce Matthew Cameron of Ashton Legal. So Matthew is a member of the Franco-British Lawyers Society, and he's a regular contributor in the national press and on radio and on TV discussing the legal implications of buying in France. So he's really, really well placed to answer our queries today. So welcome, Matthew. Thank you for fighting through the internet problems and joining us today. So I wanted to start by just asking if you can give a little bit of background into your experience and how you will be able to help the listeners today.
Okay, right, finally I've got my computer up and running and managed to unmute myself then. Sorry about being a bit late to the webinar, everyone. Good morning, and thank you, Hannah, for having introduced me. The way we can work will be in assisting a party in their a transaction that they're looking to go through in France. In a lot of respects, working alongside agents, which we do on a regular basis. So a lot of the points that Pauline has made previously in relation to how Beau Village would help people buying a property, we can add further assistance all the way through all of that process. Our usual or our main work is when we're acting for buyers, looking through with them the purchase contract documentation and ensuring that's all in order. And then looking through the final purchase deed and making sure that's all in order as well, making sure nothing hasn't been slipped into the final purchase deed that wasn't in the initial contract, or nothing's been omitted from the final purchase deed that was in the initial contract, and making sure that all those questions that have been raised so far are being addressed. One of the points that Pauline raised, for example, in relation to planning, we would also expect to see that any planning has been clarified, that if planning permission was necessary for any development work, then we'll check that was produced, and we'll check what other issues and what other documentation should have been carried out. On occasions, I think as Pauline mentioned, full planning permissions aren't always required, but there are other points as well in that respect. For example, where a planning permission was required because of some development work, then there are possibly other points as well that need to be addressed, such as whether the work is going to be guaranteed by anybody, and what the strength of those guarantees would be. So we would look into that as an example with our clients, the buyers, to make sure that everything is in order, or indeed to advise them on what the consequences would be if information can't be produced. That's a very brief summary of where we work.
Wonderful. Thank you, Matthew. That's a fantastic start. So I guess an important question to understand for our customers is, at what point in their buying journey do they need to engage you or a solicitor to support them? When do they need to get in touch?
It's always my favourite question, for two reasons. One is I don't hide the fact that there's actually no need to instruct a solicitor in England to deal with the purchase in France. As Pauline pointed out already, there will be a notaire in France who will be completing the transaction. We will be working alongside our buyers, however, and we do the same with sellers as well on separate transactions, but we'll be working alongside our buyers to make sure that they're fully aware of all of the consequences, the ramifications, and make sure the documentation is in order, to go through the terminology, and also to discuss issues of inheritance planning, which is a much more cross-border question than would be expected from a notaire. That sounds like quite a lot to deal with, which is why the second part of this, my favourite question, is in an ideal world, we would be instructed by buyers well in advance of any trip to France to go and look for properties. I do like having an initial consultation with clients so we can set out issues such as the inheritance planning consequences, making sure that they've got all their finances sorted out, so we can discuss all of those things, discuss, for example, what they how they can be planning a move to France if they're thinking about selling a house in England to finance it, what their options are in that respect, which again picks up on one of the other points that Pauline rightly mentioned, which is it is very vibrant, the market at the moment. There is a seller's market, which is quite apparent, and it's got to be accepted that if somebody's finance is sorted out well in advance, they can appear a much more attractive proposition to a seller than someone who really doesn't have all those answers in place. So in an ideal world, we would take buyers on as clients at a very, very early stage, ideally before they've identified a property, let alone agreed one. We do, however, most of the time take on our clients when they've found the property and they are just at the point of offering. It doesn't really matter.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matthew. That's great, and it certainly echoes what our other panelists have said today, that really, that it's never too early to start engaging with the experts that are going to be able to help you purchase your property. So great advice. Thank you. Now, a couple of sort of practical questions. Andrew's asked, what would the average costs be that you would charge to assist somebody with their purchase?
Okay, it's a fair question. I'm obviously not going to answer for any competitors. There are other firms of solicitors who do the sort of work. It's important to have a good look at this question, though. It really depends on what we would be asked to do. If we're just having an initial consultation or an initial review of the first contract, then our fees will be completely different from if we're going through the whole transaction, and obviously the complexity of transactions will vary substantially from one to another. Quite often, though, we would probably, if we're thinking about a whole assistance package from start to finish, you'd probably be looking in the region of £3,000 to £4,000. That may be much lower, it may be much higher. It really depends on the circumstances.
Thank you, very helpful, and I hope that answers your question a bit, Andrew. Thank you. And in terms of timescales, obviously never too early to kind of get in touch and start planning, but actually from the point of placing an offer on a property to, keys in hand, you're turning up there with the removals van, how long typically is that process?
I think it's fair to anticipate that it should be something like 3 months, more or less. That probably equates in reality to about the same amount of time it would take to complete a conveyancing purchase in England. There are some differences. When a purchase is agreed in France, the contract is usually signed very, very quickly. Whereas in England, there's normally going to be 6 weeks, a couple of months often, before the solicitors are ready to exchange. In France, it's normally much quicker, often within a couple of weeks. But after that first contract is signed, there's nearly always going to be a period of at least 2 months before the final acte de vente can be signed. And it's also important to bear in mind that even when the compromis de vente is signed, or the first contract, there is no actual, or very, very rarely is there actually a fixed completion date. That's something that differs completely from the situation in England and Wales on conveyancing transactions. In France, normally, once the contract is signed, a target date is going to be put into the contract, but that is absolutely only a guide for which the parties should be working towards. So you mentioned, Hannah, about when they can expect to turn up with their removals. One of the difficulties in that is that it really is not realistic to be booking a removals van for 2 or 3 months hence, because you'd normally have to be waiting until that actual completion date can be fixed, which is much later on.
Really good advice there. Thank you, Matthew. Thanks for that. And you mentioned obviously their contracts and paperwork and the compromis devant and documents like that. Are these documents available in English, or can you translate them into English so people know exactly what they're signing?
What we do is we'll go through the documentation and we will report to our clients in English. We won't necessarily translate the documents into English. They will inevitably be in French to start with, although some agents and occasionally some notaires do offer a translation, but they are generally only a very rough translation. The cost of translating a full purchase contract would be surprisingly high. What we will do is report to our clients to make sure that they understand what the contract is saying, and what their obligations are, what the seller's obligations are under the terms of that contract.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful. Andrew's asked a really interesting question as well. He said, is it best to use the notaire that is recommended by his agent, or is he better to find a sort of independent notaire by himself? Any advice on that?
Well, all notaires are ostensibly independent. It's important to note that notaires in general do not work either for the seller or the buyer. Hopefully Pauline will agree with me on this point, which is that most of the time, because there are fewer notaires in France than there are, for example, solicitors in England, if you're looking to buy a rural property, there's one notaire's practice going to be situated in one small town or village, and if that's the case, that notaire will probably, or that notaire's office will probably have been dealing with all of the property transactions in the region for generations. And if an agent is recommending a notaire, it's probably in practice the same notaire through whom your sellers have bought in the first place, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be used to oversee the transaction. There's not necessarily any need to have a second notaire to be involved in a transaction, especially, I would say, with a certain amount of bias on my part, especially if you're going to be instructing solicitors to assist you from here.
Great, thank you, Matthew. I hope that answered the question for Andrew. I'm conscious of our time today. I feel like we could chat on because there's so much interesting stuff to talk around here. But one sort of final question that I did want to ask about, you mentioned a little bit about sort of inheritance planning at the beginning. Yeah. Do customers need a French will to leave a French property to family, or can their will based in England do the job?
The will in England might actually be suitable. It may or may not be necessary or beneficial to have a separate French will. One of the areas in which we would expect to spend a fair amount of our time is looking at the inheritance law consequences for a particular client, and advising them on what they should and shouldn't be doing. It's unfortunately a vast area of complexity, and we would always advocate that buyers would take specific advice in this. Any sort of generic information should only be taken as background information. So, for example, we've got free guides available on our website about inheritance law, but they will only ever give a certain amount of background guidance, and really it is something that should be considered on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you, Matthew. That's really helpful advice. I think that's about all we've got time to cover today. I'm conscious we could chat on for a long time with all of the experts today, because there's been loads of really interesting information shared. So thank you to you all for sharing your expertise. The speakers' contact details have been on screen, and we will also send them out to you next week if you wish to contact them directly about any of your sort of personal circumstances or particular queries that you want answered. I also just wanted to share on screen for you, I mentioned Property Guides at the beginning, our sister business, and we're going to share a link on screen to the Property Guides website. There's loads of other buying advice and information there, which may be able to help you. You can search for properties, you can read articles, you can subscribe to our newsletter. So loads of information on there as well that will help you with your buying journey. So yes, thank you again for all joining us today and listening in. Thank you to our speakers for sharing their expertise. And I think the last thing really for me to say is we wish you a really happy and successful viewing trip to France, and ultimately your property purchase and your move. So thank you all very much, and happy property hunting. Bye everyone.